I was up on the roof terrace, hanging out the washing when the bombing started. The first thing I heard was the drone of aeroplanes from the other side of the hill. Flying in over the peak like squat, gorged mosquitoes were 6 planes, so low I could see the burning red circles painted on their sides.
This is a Second World War novel about a young British woman who experiences the Japanese invasion and occupation of Hong Kong. It is inspired by the experiences of my great-aunt, Menna Wilders, who was a prisoner of war in Stanley Camp on the southern side of Hong Kong Island between 1942 and the liberation in August 1945. In Stanley Camp, the Japanese brought 3,500 civilian internees, mainly American, British, European, and they just dumped them there unceremoniously. They weren't quite sure what to do with them. The first response was one of shock. These very rich, cosseted people had to knuckle down and work out not just a way to get along with each other, but a way to survive. The story is told from the perspective of 4 different characters. First of all, we start off with Elsa Jones, who is a young British bride, a young woman from Wales who's recently arrived in Hong Kong and is finding it quite difficult. She comes from somewhere that isn't desperately class-oriented into a very class-oriented society. She can't help but question, why is it all right for the men to have lots of girlfriends and mistresses and for the women just to play the dutiful wife? And she certainly kicks out against those kind of constraints. Secondly, we have Cantonese Amma Lin, who also is a country girl, as it happens, who's just arrived in Hong Kong. She has just travelled down from the Pearl River Delta, which a lot of young girls did at the time, to take up posts in Hong Kong. And then thirdly, when the war comes to Hong Kong, the Japanese invasion and occupation, with that comes a shift from Lin's voice to Tommy's, Elsa's husband, because Tommy keeps a diary of his time in Stanley Camp.
7th of January, turn 2 at 6 a.m. First job is to clear up. Ash heap with bones sticking out of it, still smoking in the exercise yard. Our men or theirs, we don't know.
Quite naturally, in these circumstances, Elsa and Tommy's relationship in the Rice Paper Diaries experiences quite a lot of stress. And then finally, the last section of the book shifts to a few years later, to 1947, to Elsa and Tommy's daughter, Mary, who by this time is 6 years old, and we follow her very uneasy homecoming in New Quay. It is a war story, very much so, about the events in Hong Kong, but it's also a story about coming back, about what happened after the war, about repatriation and about a family trying to settle and to feel at home again. All these things that I'd been thinking about definitely were at play when I was writing what turns out to be quite a simple story about relationships between people, very close personal relationships between people who are caught up in huge kind of worldwide events.